people who are like, hey, I want to dig into ROS packs or whatnot. Where do I start? And I feel like working groups like this are actually the perfect place for this.
Yeah, it's easier to come in and talk to us this way rather than just jumping onto and making a ticket on GitHub or something.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Yeah, so we've got a few people on the line, not as many as usual, but I assume that means these are the folks who are interested in talking about this design. We don't have to take the full hour if we don't have that much to talk about or don't have thoughts from this group. But I had proposed this while back, like I don't know. Let's see. When did I open it? February. And at the time, I was trying to cross-compile the ROS2 core, or at least the C++ client, for use on a non-Debian non-Debian Linux like package on a resource-limited board. In this case, it was a Rockchip 64 that was running a like BusyBox. I assume it was created via Yocto or something, the actual OS package. And I was trying to cross-compile the RCL CPP in order to run on there. And I found I had a really hard time managing the dependencies and figuring out what variant I needed, what subset of packages I needed to support that most minimal use case on a resource limited chip. And so what I put together was this edit to Rep 2001, which proposes the variants for ROS2. So that's, ROS core, ROS base, ROS desktop. And then I was trying to propose a C++ core or something that was even more minimal than ROS core itself, which includes like RCL Pi and some other utilities that didn't feel like the most minimal useful subset of ROS. So I don't know if any of you on the line have seen this proposal before, but it might be a good place to start to just take a look at it. The second place I would want to go would be to figure out if this is the right way to propose this thing, how we would support it. Because I think what I need to do within Rep 2001 here is, or maybe there's a different rep where we support it, or where we put these proposals and we say, we expect these builds and this dependency set to be happening for this subset of packages so that we're meeting the requirements in order to make it easy to cross-compile the core. I know that other working groups have tackled this. My main open questions on this variant were, I wanted to put all of the actual functional logic packages into it, but not include any of the build, CMake, and testing only Python packages, because those ones don't actually build for the target platform, but you need them to build the code base. So yeah, if we do, any of you on the line have thoughts about how we might approach this, that's kind of why I have this block set aside. So maybe I'll just give you a couple minutes, let me know if you have any thoughts about this. If no one has any sort of new context to add, we can always call it early.
So what's the...
Yeah, I'd like to just read through it though.
Okay. So you had a question?
What's the purpose here is still like you wanna build a workspace up to RCL CPP, is that right?
Kind of, yes. I want to build a C++ ROS2 client, and I want it to have no dependencies outside of the source workspace unless they're explicitly defined here, so that you can easily create a sysroot for cross-compiling. So it's kind of like you want to build ROS2 up to RCL CPP is sort of the first step of it, but you also want it to have some strong definitions about its dependency set so that it is portable.
The reason why I'm asking is like, what's the deal with your Python dependencies? Because like I don't feel a way of like getting around it.
So the only Python dependencies in here that I know of are for the tests and not for the functionality itself. And that's the part that, yeah, I don't see how you get around it, but I also don't see why it should block a regular build, except I guess you need to test your packages for those cross-compiled builds. But you would want to test them on the target platform, which you could do in Docker or something.
Okay. Because then, I mean, so what I have in mind is like maybe there's a way of like having, I don't know if it's that easy, but like, you know, you could have, sorry, what I'm thinking of is like, even if you want to build it with Qualcomm, you have some Qualcomm and Python amen dependencies, right?
Yeah, so that's again the build tools, right?
Exactly. And so what I'm thinking is like maybe then one way to approach this is actually, okay, we have a variant which is like clearly only the core packages you wanna compile, and have some sort of wrapper around Qualcomm which just by default says, hey, we don't even build the tests. Because like the way I could see this is a little bit confusing for people. It's like, hey, there's a core stack and I run Qualcomm build and it fails all over the place, right? Because by default you build the tests, or like that CMake flag, build testing is on. So I feel like we should take at least the people somewhat on their hand, saying like, hey, by the way, if you want to do that and you want to do a minimal set, please don't build the tests.
Yeah, and that is how I got around actually, because I did end up being able to create this build in the end. But I just had build testing equals no, which means I wasn't able to sort of validate the outputs on the target platform in the output architecture. So I had what is it? ROS2 tool chain cross compile. I don't remember. I had made this a real long name. I got it right. So I had used this little repo here. I just had a sort of instructions for myself to set up a Linaro-based sysroot and run a Colcon build with the right tool chains, but it was not easy to get here. And that's why I wanted to try and define this variant, and it would be really nice if it was well supported and had a specific set of options.
Are you using a real toolchain, or are you just cross-compiling it in Docker?
And I'm not. It's not an emulated compile. I am doing it in Docker just for dependency management, but I'm using augmented Linaro sysroot, and then the tool chain to point us at the Linaro cross compilers was what I was using in this particular case.
Yeah. Okay.
So this is what I've been trying to get our cross compile tool up to. Like, I know it's possible. I've built all of ROS2 with these tool chains, but the tool itself doesn't automate that yet. For the generic case.
Yeah, I wonder. Yeah, but it's rough. I mean, like we can. The only concern I have is really, how does it, or how can we configure the build tool in a way that it fails gracefully?
Yeah.
The second thing which comes into my mind here is like, if we have these CPP core variants, isn't there quite some overlap in there?
Yeah, and so the way I proposed it here, I believe, was that ROS core extends ROS CPP core. I think there's a lot of long comment line on here. But basically I said ROS CPP core, it's got this long list of packages, but it's a lot shorter than regular ROS core, and it included a lot of stuff I wasn't so sure about. Was a lot of I meant stuff like it's important and it needs the support, but it doesn't go onto the target platform, and I wish there was a way to sort of differentiate those dependencies. And then what did I say? Oh, I didn't say that ROS core extends it. I was trying to. My first version of the PR specified that ROS core extends ROS CPP core, which is not the case in this version of it. But yes, there's a significant overlap, and I think it's really just a subset. Except I was trying to propose specifically Cyclone because it had no dependencies outside the source tree, whereas like FastRDPS depended on lib ASO. Yeah, it actually had few, relatively speaking.
You have boost and everything in there.
Is there boost in FastDDS?
I think so. At least it's an option.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. At least on my side, I personally like the idea because I have these kind of like similar requirements. I don't know if it's easy to bring those up mainstream.
Yeah, well, I think there are probably a lot of people out there who want to run ROS2 on resource-limited devices that are not necessarily running in RTOS, like not that low level, right? There's this middle space where you've got sort of a minimal Linux distribution that does have a full-on Linux kernel, but you don't have, the package managers. Like maybe you're building your OS distribution for Yocto, in which case, maybe the solution is just the Yocto build layer for ROS2, and this doesn't matter, but it's nice to be able to build your application outside of the OS, bundle, and then be able to just, copy a build over. I feel like that's pretty huge.
Yep.
We could also utilize this subset variant within, the Yocto layer that there's those guys from LG that support that. And I can see why they build devices that are small. Yeah, so I don't have concrete ideas. I was kind of hoping that Dirk would be here. I feel like he would have strong opinions to throw in. It's Python to run the code generators. And so, yeah, I wanted to make some differentiation between a like runtime variant versus the tooling around it. Because it does feel weird that your build tooling, your image packages, and your message generators are in the same source tree, in the same package managing system as your functionality itself, although that's baked pretty heavily into the whole ROS.
I was just say that's I would actually claim that's one of the core requirements of ROS, where like you can just have like a little text file which is your message definition, and it spits out C++ code, and even though you don't even have to know about it, right?
Yeah, totally. I don't know if it requires it to be structured this way for you to get that experience. Like maybe you have sort of a subtrees of your source that are tooling versus application code, but it is baked pretty heavily into the whole structure of ROS and ROS2 at this point. So I don't know if you can change that. Because to me, the message generator is on par with the compiler in that it takes your input and translates it out into output that your machine can read.
Sure.
And like we don't consider, say, GCC to be one of the portions of the variant. You don't need it installed on the target platform in order to run your code. But that's also true of the way that the ROS dep dependency types are structured. Like we do have build depends versus exec depends, and the only place I know of where that's actually used is in packaging the Debians for the apt repo, is that it only depends on the exec depends. Um, do you know what code does that packaging if that's open?
No idea.
Okay.
No idea. Yeah, there's a good part of the build farm which is black magic for me.
Yeah, and I don't think it's up on GitHub even, or if it is, it's like private repo.
Oh, it is the build farm. The build farm is completely open. Everything is open there. But it's just like I'm pretty sure you have to dig in through like years of development. I'm not sure if that's even clearly documented there.
Yeah, maybe it's on ROS infrastructure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess there are theoretically ways to look at how it does that. Configure the jobs being generated, which is probably this. No, I don't know about that.
But so once again, what's the actual problem with Python? Because like if you have Python on your host machine,
So I didn't
that
the
should be
first time.
totally fine, no?
Yeah, I didn't the first time I was trying to do this, but then the next version of the board that the person I was working with sent me, they did have Python in their OS bundle. So maybe it is not unreasonable to expect a board that can run ROS2 to be able to also run Python, which is one of the most portable code bases out there. So, I mean,
Yes,
even if
sorry, I mean the other way around. What's the even if the target platform doesn't run Python, as long as your host runs Python, you should be good to go, no?
so there was Python in like RCL requires Python as a test dependency, and so I'm still trying to figure out like how you can have your outputs be testable. Either that or we just say that your outputs are not testable, but then it hardly feels like a supported variant, you know?
I see. Okay, but
Yeah,
like
it's like launch
I'm
testing and stuff like that.
right. I was just more like referring to DX comment where you said like in the pull request where you said like, yeah, the message generator need a Python interpreter.
Yeah, but it's not a runtime requirement for that.
Exactly. So that would be totally fine, at least
Yeah,
for a
that one's
cross
totally fine.
compilation.
I think if I made a comment where that's not, oh yeah, Dirk said this needs Python for code generators. I said it's not needed at runtime.
Oh, I didn't see your comment
Yeah.
on top.
Oh yeah, and one of the other problems we ran into is that Colcon generates a Python file for setup.bash. We'd have to make a new setup script if we wanted to not have Python on the target platform.
That is very true.
Which, maybe isn't that big of a deal. I mean, you could maybe even write a C, C++ implementation porting the Python setup logic and just have it be a binary.
Would be interesting to talk to the folks of QNX from BlackBerry. They just recently opened a whole bunch of PRs against ROS2 mainline for I don't know 7.4 or something. Some QNX variant. And I wonder how they handle it because like I know that the Python 3 is supported on QNX, but it's not.
It's not part of the default.
Not a strict requirement as far as I know.
Yeah. Do you know where they opened the PRs?
All over the place. There's one meta ticket on ROS2, I thought. Might be closed by now. You have to look into like the closed tickets. Q&A support.
Looks like it just got closed out.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. I will have to take a look through these tickets because that is relevant. I guess something I could figure out is how much of ROS2 are they trying to compile? Because that's the question too. Is like ROS2 is not one thing, and so that's why I was trying to define a variant to really limit it down to like, okay, we have to have strong support for this portion, but the rest of it is no big deal if you can't compile RViz for my system on a chip.
So I wonder, does it make sense to actually have like, before we go into like resource limited chips and boards, does it make sense to have like the work you started with cross compile, that we flesh this out a little bit more, which essentially gets rid of Docker and like actually works with a toolchain and sysroot and all that, which comes with it.
Yeah, so I would still use Docker just because it manages the dependencies so well, but I would get rid of emulation. Well, even then, I still might need emulation for creating the initial sysroot. I have a branch that works, but I hard coded some stuff in that branch. I just need to clean it up because we've held a fairly high standard for those code reviews, and so me just putting my work in progress up as a PR probably wouldn't fly. And we've been in a weird state right now. We're not allowed to make. We have to ask for permission for every PR to the cross-compile repo for right now, for the moment, just because of some internal stuff that's going on. So I've just slowed down on that. But yeah, you can take a look at what I already have up there. Which
because like the reason, so one thing, it's like a precise problem I'm facing these days is like I basically do all my work on my Mac, and I have like embedded machines or even x86 machines I have to provision, and I don't want to go constantly through a Linux VM and like spawn Docker and then have an emulation within a virtual machine kind of thing, right?
Oh, why do you need that part? Why can't you run the Docker just on your Mac side?
Oh yeah, but that's what it does, right? Docker on Mac spawns a Linux VM.
Right. Yeah.
So I have to go through an hypervisor and all that stuff. And so ideally, I would like to have like a plain stupid toolchain, with a sysroot and whatnot. And so like I spend a good chunk of my week actually getting that stupid cross tool ng thing to compile and spit out a toolchain for me. But at least that way I can use like a simple toolchain file and I run on my workspace and so if we could maybe come up with something which
works without Docker here.
Which works without Docker.
Yeah.
Or at least without emulation, right? If we go back to native tools, because then we can also just do it for Windows and all that stuff. That would be interesting.
You could cross compile on Windows. Can you cross compile to Windows? Probably not, because you can't get a sysroot for it.
So I read through that cross tool ng, and apparently there's a compiler for it though. I'm not sure about the sysroot, but I heard people compiling for Android and all that stuff.
Yeah, Android still is.
But Android is Linux. It's a Linux kernel. It's true.
Exactly. That's cool. I'll have to take a look at this. I'm not familiar with it myself. Like, I'm definitely not a cross-compile expert. I just have managed to do a slightly better job getting it up and running than people I have worked with in the past, and so I ended up being the one who has to do it. Uh, so yeah. Anyways, this you could take a look at this. This is has tool chains in it that so the build itself is still running in Docker, but it is a tool chain running against sysroot. The sysroot itself is still created by emulation, but there are other ways we could do that. Because I'm basically running, like an ARM64 Ubuntu image, doing all the apt installs from ROSDEP, and then exporting that as a like directory that then I run the cross compile looking at that as the sysroot. So that's the part that would still be problematic, I think, for your hypervisor use case.
Because it's still different binary code then, right?
Yeah.
It's still on the host. Sorry, on the target platform. So if I want to compile from like a Darwin, like an OS X board to an ARM 32, ARM 64, then like my sysroot is different, and I can compile that.
Yeah. I mean, so this is right now this tool is only able to create sysroots for like Ubuntu or Debian based on like creating a base image, and then this is emulated how it does its installs, and then that's exported as a directory, and so that's generic across wherever your host platform is, but it still needs to emulate to do it, and I'm not sure of a good way around that, because the only way I really know how to like understand the dependencies of a workspace is to, generically speaking, is to ask ROSDEP for the install instructions for that platform.
Yep.
I don't know if there's a better way around that, because then with those install steps, the best thing I could think to do is to just run them in an emulated environment. I guess you could sort of introspect the install, like apt installs, and you could use something like the Bootstrap or Multistrap to gather up the sysroot in a native way instead of emulating it. I've thought about that. I don't know if that sort of generically figures out the solution, because that only works for Debian-based distros. I mean, at a certain point, it's like you can't do dependency management unless it's a ROSDEP supported platform.
Right.
Yeah, so it becomes a hard problem for the generic use case. Like, the thing I really want this tool to support is like the Raspberry Pi and like a TX2, like something you're running Ubuntu on or Debian on, but you just want to build on your development computer instead of on that thing. That's the first use case, at least. And it doesn't support that all that well. I know this sort of we got sidetracked, but it's all part of the same, like, I want a proposal for people to be able to easily build this ROS2, some portion of it, for a target platform that doesn't have everything. And I don't know, so I'm feeling less and less like I concretely know what that looks like, but I have more and more ideas about the things we need to think about, at least, so there's value to the conversation. So if you have sort of ideas about what you would want this tool to support workflow-wise, I think that would really help me think about directing the development. Because it sounds like you have a use case, you're using this cross-tool ng, like there's...
I mean, the cross-tool ng is really just like to give me native cross-compilers, right?
Yeah.
All it does is really like it compiles a tool chain for me.
Yeah, and maybe this tool could invoke cross-tool ng for the user to get them a tool chain, or we provide a way to provide your own tool chain once you've created one. But I think that the important thing is like, what inputs do you want to provide versus what do you want the tool to take care of for you, and like how would you want that workflow to look like? I think that input would be really valuable, because I'm so far been informed by really only my use case, which is my target is I have a Jetson TX2 that I've strapped onto a Turtlebot 2, and I am trying to build my workspace to deploy to that TX2, which is running minimal-ish Ubuntu on ARM64. And so I've informed most of my sort of direction around supporting that use case, which is good, but it's necessary but not sufficient, because it's not hitting your use case, for example. So I don't know, if you have any time, if you could sort of write up what your requirements are for a cross-compile tool, I would like to figure out the path to make it more generically useful. It's got some usage. We've got a weirdly large number of stars compared to like ROSBag 2 has fewer, weirdly. But I think people just got excited about it, and then you don't go unstar things once you realize something's more boring than you thought.
Yeah, I'll give it a shot. I have to admit, I'm not super clear in what's going to happen in order to have my use case supported. So I might have to, do some digging on myself here before I come up with something in writing. But yeah.
Yeah, or if you could just take notes on what your process is, whatever parts of it you can share, then even just that list of steps, I think would help inform what the tool should be automating.
Yep, sounds good.
Yeah, because basically mine is like this repo here is my notes on this rock chip workflow. So, and I'm definitely not supporting this via the Python tool right now. Though I'm possibly getting close with my work in progress branch. It's a pretty big change set. I need to break it down into a few features. So that's that on that. Jesse, Jason, you guys got any thoughts about minimal ROS variants or cross compilation or anything?
No thoughts right now, but I think once I have more, I will get back to you.
No problem. No pressure or anything. I just wanted to hold the room.
Yeah, I think it's just like I'm just like going through this. It's taking a while.
Oh yeah. Did you? I mean, reading the proposal helps.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it feels like the only problems here were with testing and the setup, all of which are so the setup bash stuff is solvable. The rest of the core up to RCL CPP had fairly few actual outside requirements.
How did you solve the bash RC stuff on your example?
I didn't. I just manually set the like LD library path and the paths to find the binaries. So it didn't. I did a merge install, so all the libs and the bins were in just like one or two directories. So I was able to sort of solve that manually.
Okay.
Because at the end of the day, you can just invoke the binary, and you don't need to call. Because I didn't have the command line tools because I didn't have Python, so I just invoked the node directly, which I think is all fine. It might be nice to have non-Python based launcher utilities. That becomes a big project. Or maybe I just say you need to have Python, because at this point, it's pretty easy to get Python cross-compiled. Yeah, so setup, actual problem, or setup solvable. Testing, I don't know how we solve that in terms of supporting the packages. I don't know how this proposal looks, is the thing. When you say, I want to support these set of packages to actually go onto a target computer, and these other set of packages are required as dependencies for building it, and these other set of packages are required as, it is just a split out of the raw step tree, and maybe it's important to lay that out. And then how do you test it? You kind of want to run the test suite on the target board. Otherwise, you don't have a lot of certainty around how well things work. Yeah, I might need to take another pass at this and just see how much extra dependency it pulls in to have something like testing tools. I think it pulls in a pretty big set of, or pip set, Python package set. Anyways, I don't know. This conversation helps, at least for me, focus in what it was we were trying to think about. I got all of the thoughts out of my head. Does anyone else have anything else on this topic for now? Otherwise, I think I'm happy to call it here. Or anything else you want to talk about that's not the same.
Nothing on my.
That's cool. Okay. Thanks for coming today, guys. Thanks for the helping me refine the thoughts, Karsten. Appreciate it.
Sure, have it done.
Yeah, and if you have time, obviously take care of your priorities, but if you have time, if you could write down your steps for cross-building your workspace.
Yeah.
Cool. All right,
Definitely.
I'll see you all next week for the regular meeting.
All right, happy Friday.
All right.
Happy Friday.
Happy Friday.